back in the US. She's been all over the world.
I heard she went to the Booker Short
She's
Announcement.
friends with Marlon James.
Honestly, at this point, I'm just waiting for my ticket to the National Book Award banquet. Okay, maybe not quite. I think any little bit of ego that I gained from all of that, I immediately lost as I was in the Heathrow airport, realizing that I had in fact booked my return flight home through the Gatwick airport. You know, the other airport in London that's like at least an hour away through public transit. There's nothing that humbles you quite like that. And honestly, it was kind of hilarious how proud I was of myself for like navigating the tube, then the train, and then getting to the airport, all just for somebody to tell me that I was at the wrong airport. Anyways, hi, my name is Sarah Freshley and welcome back to Freshly Read Books. But I gained quite a few books. Honestly, I think I am officially on like a book buying ban at this point because I have too many books. Like my TBR no longer fits on my bookshelves. It's a problem and I need to fix it. So I just really need to make sure that I'm not buying like any more books, with the exception of books from the National Book Award, because I do think that I want to read all of those. Is that something that you would be interested in? After I'm done with Booker doing reviews on all of the National Book Award longlisted books, let me know. It looks like a great list and I haven't read any of them, so. But in the meantime, I want to talk about the books that I've recently gotten across 4 different countries, 3 different continents. And is one of those countries the US? You know, the country I live in? Yes. But it is on the other side of the country, so I hope that that still counts. It's still like travel. I mean, it was in an airport, but like, anyways, we'll talk about it when we get there. But with that, let's go ahead and get into these books, starting with Indonesia. Also, can I just say that I actually recorded this once already with my microphone off. I wasn't recording audio this whole time. And like my brain still hasn't quite processed the fact that I'm gonna have to talk about all these books again. I just immediately like restarted and was like, don't think about it. Don't think about how long this is about to take. Just do it. But if I lose my mind by the end of this, that's why. Just to warn you. I'm just like anticipating that I'm gonna lose my mind. Anyways, Indonesia. In Indonesia, I didn't actually go to any bookstores, mostly because I didn't see any bookstores there. We weren't really in like any cities, so I'm assuming that that's why, but we did stay in a lot of homestays that had like bookshelves or book areas where people could both take and leave books that they're reading while traveling. Now, a lot of these books weren't in English, because really the main English speakers that travel to Indonesia are from Australia, and a lot of that is for surfing, specifically in Kutulambak, which is a big like surfing town. And that is actually where I ended up finding any English books in general. The 2 books I picked up in Indonesia were both from the same homestay there. The first one is Notes from a Big Country by Bill Bryson. Bill Bryson is the author of A Walk in the Woods, which is a fairly well-known book, I would say, and one that I intend on reading hopefully soon. It's on my TBR Tackle list. TBR Tackle, if you don't know, is a year-long readathon that is done by Kieran from KD Books, where at the beginning of the year you pick 12 books that go on your TBR Tackle list, and then every month you get a prompt that leads you to one of those books or just causes like absolute chaos. But I've been doing that all year. There's a whole playlist if you want to catch up. And that book's on my TBR Tackle list, which is just 3 books long at this point because we're nearly at the end of the year. So it's very possible that I'll be reading that within one of these next few months. And I'll probably read that before I get to Notes from a Big Country, just because I'm more excited about that book. But this one is about, so basically Bill Bryson lived in England for 20 years and then moved back to the US where he's from originally. And then this book is like observations that he had from a new perspective after being gone for so long and then coming back to the country that he grew up in. He's also got one that is from his time in England that's called Notes from a Small Island, and maybe if I like this one, I'll read that one. The other book that I got from there was The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime, which I no longer have because I actually read it while I was on the trip, and then I left it in a homestay in Thailand like 2 weeks after picking it up. This book is by Mark Haddon and is about Christopher, who is a neurodivergent teenager, I think he's like 14, 15, and he is trying to solve the mystery of who killed his neighbor's dog. And while he's doing that, he's writing about it. He's very inspired by Sherlock Holmes, who he really likes. So the title of his book, which is The Curious Case of the Dog, The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime, is paying homage to Sherlock Holmes similarly titled stories. So that's what the book is about, but then it ends up being about so much more than that, and Christopher ends up going on this big adventure that isn't really like that big of an adventure, but because at the time that that happens, you already know Christopher so well, you know what he likes and what he dislikes, you know what he's really good at and what he struggles with, then you know exactly how big of an adventure this really is for him. And yeah, overall it was just really good, and I totally understand why it's talked about as much as it is. Next, we went to Thailand, where I went to 2 different bookstores. So the first one was just in an airport on Koh Samui, which is an island in Thailand. And honestly, this airport was like the best airport I have ever been to. Like all of the walkways and like sitting areas and everything was all outdoors, covered, but outdoors. So I'm not quite sure how it would be in the rain. Like it rained a little bit while we were there, but it wasn't like strong rain, but it was absolutely gorgeous while we were there. Even with the like little bit that it rained. There was also a bunch of like shops and food places, and there was a cute little bar there. And I've now decided that all airports should be like that. I know that's not possible. Like some places get cold, but just like to have that feel of like being in like a cute little town instead of just feeling like how I feel like airports normally feel, which is kind of like your cattle just being like herded into certain areas. Anyways, my friend and I went to the bookstore in that airport and we both picked out a book. She actually already finished hers and then she lent it to me to read, so I have both of those now. So the book that she lent to me is Together We Will Go by J. Michael Straczynski, which is about a group of people that are in a bus traveling to San Francisco, and the intent when they get to San Francisco is to drive off a cliff. So the story follows I believe just like that trip to San Francisco and all of the characters and what has brought them to this point. I think that my friend's general feelings of it was that she likes it but didn't love it. And then the book that I picked up while we were in that bookstore was How to Stop Time by Matt Haig. Now, typically I have this kind of rule for myself that is not a strict rule. It's basically just that when I'm in a bookstore, I'll try to pick up a book that I haven't heard of or I don't really know much about, where most of my experience with the book just comes from finding it, seeing it, and like reading the back of the book in the bookstore. I just think that that's a lot of fun, and it's not something that I really get to do online shopping for books. It doesn't feel the same, so I like to do that when I'm in bookstores. However, I definitely have heard of this book, and I even know that I was thinking about buying it at some point and reading it, so clearly I broke the rule on this one. But just being in that bookstore, there weren't any books that I hadn't already heard of that were really jumping out at me. I read a lot of synopses and just none of them seemed to fit right, so I ended up going with one that I already knew that I wanted to read. Now, I actually do have another Matt Haig book, The Midnight Library, that I haven't read yet. That's another thing I don't typically do, is buy multiple books by the same author without having read one of their books before, but here we are. I do still plan on reading The Midnight Library. It's just that I heard that it didn't really like live up to the immense amount of hype that it got, and so now I just need to like wait for all of my thoughts and feelings to just disappear for it, and then I can like go into it feeling nothing at all. I don't know why that sounded dark. It wasn't meant to be. Anyways, this book is about a man that has been alive for centuries but looks like he's in his early 40s, and he can continue this as long as he continues to move around and change identity. Basically, as long as he's not staying still, he's good. But he finds a reason to stay still in this book. And then this is about that. Then the next bookstore that we stopped in was in Bangkok, which was this really cute bookstore that they didn't let us take pictures in, but I did take a picture of the outside of it. And so you can kind of get a feel for what it was like. But the best part about it was that it had a section for local authors that had been translated into English. So that was a really great find. So my friend and I decided that we would buy 3 books and share those between us. So once one of us read it, giving it to the other person. So I have 2 of the 3 with me, and she's got 1 of them. Now, we actually did end up getting 2 books by the same local author, which was not intentional. We sat there and read through all of the synopses of those local authors that were in that little section, and just the 2 that sounded like we would most want to read them happened to be by the same author. And we didn't realize until we were checking out and the owner was telling us that. But he seemed to think it was a good decision because he really likes her writing. And also both the books that we bought, she won the Southeast Asia Write Award for, or the SEA Award. So the first book that we got by her was Memories of the Black Rose Cat, and her name is Viyapur Niti Prapa. I don't know if that's the correct pronunciation. I tried to look it up online, but I couldn't find anywhere that had it. So if I am wrong about that and you know the correct pronunciation, if you could please spell it phonetically for me in the comments, that would be a big help, because I'm sure that I'll want to talk about this again once I read it, and I'd love to pronounce her name correctly. And this was translated by Kong Reithdi. So this book is a multi-generational saga. So it's 3 generations of a Chinese Thai family living in Thailand. It's also got magical realism and I believe a curse. So I'm excited about it. Also, just like the title, the cover, all of it, it's just so cool. And then the other book that we got was The Blind Earthworm in the Labyrinth, I want to say, by the same author, same translator, and that's the one that my friend currently has. And that is about 2 sisters and a friend of theirs, and like throughout their lives together. And then I know that it said something about it being like told in this old traditional Thai romantic style, but also about like the delusion of that. So I'm not fully sure what any of that means, but I'm looking forward to reading it. And then the other book that we got from that bookstore was not from a local author, but from a Japanese author, The Decagon House Murders by Yukito Ayatsuji, and translated by Ho Ling Wong, I want to say. Yes, Ho Ling Wong. So this book is heavily inspired by Agatha Christie's And Then There Were None, and it's like in a world where that book exists and the characters in it know about that book and know it very well, but also it's got influences from other stories as well, from other classic mysteries. Basically, as soon as I saw this say the Japanese cult classic mystery, I had to buy it without even having read the back. And I think that with that I learned about myself that anything that says cult classic on it, or if I hear something described as that, like a movie or something, then I have to like immediately watch it or consume whatever the media is, because I just have like that FOMO, that fear of missing out on it. Like I want to understand anything that's considered a cult classic, and I don't know how I feel about that about myself. It's one of those things where I'm like, ooh, I'm really easily influenced by this one certain thing. Maybe I shouldn't be. Anyways, it ended up working out in this case because I really liked this book. I have read this already. I had a poll up on my Instagram before I went on the trip that shortly followed my Indonesia, Thailand trip, and I asked which book I should bring with me, and this book won. So I have read this book already. I can happily say that I did like it. This is about a group of students at a university that are a part of a mystery club, and that mystery club goes to an island that is known for these gruesome murders that happened there, I think like a year before when the book is set. And on this island there is the Blue Mansion, which is burned down, so there's just like the ruins of that. And then there's also this structure called the Decagon House, which is in the shape of a decagon, so it's like this 10-sided house that is where the students are staying, the students that are in the club. And then And Then There Were None, people start dying. But you also get some perspective from the mainland, like there are things that are happening there as well as on the island, so you're not just on the island the whole time. And also you get like the benefit of these characters being so into mystery novels that they are saying a lot of the things that you're thinking as you're reading it. If you read a lot of mystery novels, like obviously when you read them, you have the tendency to think about more outlandish scenarios to try to guess like what the twist is and what's going on in the story and who did it and all that stuff. And the characters in this are much like that as well, although they do admit oftentimes like, oh, that's starting to sound too much like it's a mystery novel. I need to remember that this is like real life, basically. But of course, all of the characters are different and unique in their own ways. And it was a little tough initially because you get introduced to like all the characters at the same time to keep them separate in my mind, but it wasn't too long before they each had at least like one quirk or personality trait that I could remember each of them for and then kind of build upon that. Next up is the US. So as I was coming home from Thailand, I flew through Tokyo and then was supposed to go to Chicago and then back home to Tampa here. However, while I was in Tokyo, my flight got canceled, my flight to Chicago. So I ended up going to LA instead, and that ended up pushing my trip back and putting my arrival time here back quite a bit, although not as bad as it could have been. I was very fortunate through that whole situation that I even got on the flight that I did get on. But what all that meant was that at a certain point, I was in the LA airport very tired because I had just spent the last 2 nights on an airplane. I had not slept in a bed for the last 2 nights. I was instead sleeping only on airplanes, and I had spent like 15-16 hours in the Tokyo airport on that layover, and I was looking at another layover in LA and then having another overnight flight before I would be home, and would have to like start my work week. I arrived home at 6 a.m. and then had to work that day. So I was a bit upset and I was very tired. And so I decided to treat myself to some books. So I went to an actually like great bookstore for being in an airport, in the LA airport, and I bought 4 books, which I don't typically buy that many books in a bookstore at once. Anyways, the first book that I got there was Finlay Donovan is Killing It, which once again is a book that I had heard of before I went there. So this is the other rule break I made. I mean, it's not really a rule, it's just kind of something I do. I definitely heard of this before. It's very big, I would say, in like the mystery novel sphere. A lot of people have been talking about how fun and like twisty it is. It's about Finlay Donovan, who is an author, and while she's talking about the synopsis of her upcoming book over the phone, somebody thinks that she is like this hit person for hire and then tries to hire her, and she, quote, inadvertently accepts the offer. The offer, not the author, the offer. And then the story unfolds from there. So it sounds like a lot of fun. I'm excited to read it. And then the next book that I got from there was Tell Me Lies by Corla Lovering. I'm not sure if that's the correct pronunciation of her name. And I won't lie to you, pun not intended, but I did pick this up largely because, or at least picked it up to look at it because of the Hulu thing right here saying that this is going to be like a TV series coming soon. That's once again one of those like FOMO things, like I don't want to miss out on it, but I want to read it first, so I picked it up. But also like the back of the book sounds interesting. So this is about Lucy, who is in college and she starts dating this guy Steven, or at least I don't know if they're dating, but there's something going on there. But it seems like he's hiding something, but she's kind of okay with it because she likes the attention, because I think he's like pretty popular in himself. So she's like okay that he's hiding something, but wants to figure out what it is. I don't know. That's the general feel that I got from the back of the book. Next is If You Could Live Anywhere by Melody Warnick, which is a nonfiction book about basically like if you could work anywhere that has internet, then how do you choose where you want to live? And since my fiance and I, Kurt, are in that exact situation, we are both remote employees, and we've for a long time been trying to decide where we'd want to live. Really, COVID is the only reason why we've been in Florida for as long as we have. We were really close to moving out before this all started, but this is still a conversation that we actively have and are starting to think more and more about. So I figured getting a nonfiction book about it seems like a pretty good call. This book really jumped out at me and I was like, oh, perfect timing. And then the last book that I got from that bookstore is The Guide by Peter Heller. This sounds like so much up my alley. It's got like all the elements of a book that I would like. This is set in the somewhat future in the US, where we've basically been dealing with like a lot of viruses, and I think that they are still dealing with that at the time of the book. But there is this like really nice fishing lodge that is for super wealthy people to go and kind of get away from it all. And Jack, our main character, works there as a guide, and he gets assigned to a client that is a famous singer, and basically his job is to like carry her stuff around, show her where the good fishing spots are and like when to fish there, that kind of a thing. But then it turns out that the fishing lodge isn't all that it appears to be, and there's like maybe something else going on. Also, I just noticed that on the back of the book it's described as a Michael Crichton-esque thriller, so I'm very excited about that. I think I might read this in November when I go to my parents' place in the Smoky Mountains, because I think that that would be like the best time to read a nature-based thriller. Lastly, I went to London for the Booker shortlist announcement and went to my very first Waterstones, which, as I understand it, is like the Barnes & Noble of the UK. I don't actually know how, like, where all Waterstones is. Or is Blackwell's the Barnes & Noble of the UK? Let me know. And that Waterstones that I went to has so many books. And I picked up 2. The first one is The Octopus Man by Jasper Gibson, which is about a man that struggles with mental health, and he hears these voices from this guy called like the Octopus God, and then his sister wants him to do this experimental drug trial in order to get rid of those voices. But it kind of seems like, based off the back of the book, that it's going to be exploring more like, should he want to silence that voice, or like, is it a part of who he is, like that kind of perspective. And then lastly, I got Waypoints by Robert Martineau, which jumped out at me because I really like books that are about like long journeys, especially if they're like walking journeys. and I'd only ever read those types of books that are set in the US, so I thought it'd be really cool to read one that was not set in the US. This one's set in Africa, but I'll be honest, I did think that this was written by somebody that was from West Africa, walking through West Africa. It's not. This guy is from the UK, I think, or somewhere in Western Europe, so not quite the read I was excited about. And really the only reason why I was excited about it being from that perspective is that the thing that I really like about those types of books is that it typically gives the person that's like going through the experience a new perspective on like their own home or their own country. And I really like exploring that as opposed to a story about a person that's like in a completely new place. But I am still interested to read it overall. It just like, it's not as much in the sweet spot for me as I initially thought it was, if that makes sense. Anyways, those are all of the books that I hauled from 4 different countries and I'm very excited to read, but I seriously need to stop buying books at this point, except for maybe the National Book Award. Remember to tell me if I should read and review those. Thank you. And you can give me permission to buy a few more books. Only the ones I can't get from the library. I'll be good, I promise. And also let me know what the most recent book you purchased is. Anyways, that is going to do it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, please do consider subscribing. I upload new videos every Wednesday, so I will see you then. Bye.